Thank you, Alison. And as we meet here today on the unceded lands of Palawa people, the original and ongoing owners of the land, I open today's meeting at 1 p.m. Thank you. You may be seated. There are a couple of apologies here today in the opening of today's meeting. Councillor Palmer, who we wish the best of birthdays yesterday, Councillor Britton and Councillor Gibson. Merit acknowledgements. I do have a merit acknowledgement that I would like to make, having been to the National Trust breakup last night and the work that they're doing with Tourism Tas and the award that they've just taken for the Hobart Jail. I know that that's down south, but the work that they do with Clarendon House and also Franklin House, and we thank Councillor Harris for being on that committee. We wish them the best as winning the award here in Tasmania. They take that then over to the mainland. In 3, declarations of minutes. A councillor must declare any interest that a councillor has in any matter before that decision or discussion on that matter commences. Do we have any declarations of interest today? Thank you. There being none, we'll move forward to the confirmation of the minutes at 4.1. The recommendation that the minutes of the ordinary meeting, which was held here on the 14th of November, be confirmed as true and correct record. Somebody to move? Councillor Harris, seconded. Seconded by Councillor Raze. All those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. At 5, we have council workshops. 5.1, the recommendation is that council notes the council workshops conducted and attended since the last council meeting for the purposes described and published as a part of this agenda. Somebody to move? Moved by the Deputy. Councillor Kai. Deputy Mayor, would you like to speak to any? Councillor Kai, speak to any workshops? Any comments around the table around workshops? Okay, there being none, we'll put it to the vote. All of those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. We have no councillors' leave of absence applications or community reports that have been identified as a part of this agenda. So moving forward to 8, which is public question time. 8.1, public questions on notice. They are published and in the publicly available agenda with those responses. At 8.2, we have public questions without notice. Noting that the rules and regulations, they are displayed and available upon entry. You may ask a total of 3 questions each. Opening to the floor, public questions.
Missing Alex. Okay, thank you. I think that's might be too late. Okay, thank you. I'm Rosalind Ives from West Launceston. Oh, it's up there. Okay. Not-for-profit established community groups, especially literary ones, such as Right Here, Book Council of Lutruwita, Women's Writers Group, poetry groups like Poetry Peddlers, and many more long-time established groups with sustained public membership numbers are in need of a regular meeting place that is affordable or free. Level 2 of the library and QV Mag's small meeting room are only available in daytime hours. Pubs have been used as venues from time to time, but have many limitations. The library has recently substantially increased its hire fees and has become non-affordable. St Luke's, Macquarie House and Door of Hope are likewise unaffordable. A pub is not always able to provide a suitable space for night events, and community halls also have higher charges. Does Council agree that a space for groups and associations of this size to meet is needed in the CBD? Patterson Street Barracks is ideal in location and has huge potential. A perfect community meeting place with parking. Rosny Barn in Hobart was developed by Clarence Council as a much-needed cultural meeting and events venue. The barracks similarly could be developed. Higher charges for the barracks could be on a sliding scale to enable smaller not-for-profits to have access. Will Council pursue the purchase of the Patterson Barracks as raised by Councillor Walker to provide a much-needed space to expand the cultural offerings of the Launceston community?
Thank Thank you, Ms. Ives. Thank you for your question and your advocacy in the community. As was noted in the responses to councillors' questions around continued advocacy and looking into the Patterson Street Barracks, I think this is an ongoing conversation that the council will be having as we do move forward and as we work with our state colleagues and the owners of that building as to what that might look like into the future. But it's definitely on the radar for this council to ensure that there are meeting spaces. We can even say that in our master planning that we are proposing with the federal government around looking into the tram sheds down there and what's at QV Mag, looking to try and get the collection out of there and to be looking at opening up some spaces for our community. This is an absolute priority for this council. It's just a process that has to be worked through, and we understand that there are some restraints around availability and also some pricing. But we're encouraged around this council's movement around the fees and charges and how we've done some more plateauing around that to ensure that there are some equity and some availabilities there.
Yeah, thank you, because there's a large number of groups and a large number of people who have attended and belonged to these groups for a long time. We're going to lose them if we price them out of being able to afford.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Further questions without notice from the public?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Robin Smith on behalf of Coffee Republic. I appreciate the council officer's answer to my question that appears on today's agenda. The question I have over that is when I read that literature, as obviously whoever wrote that GHD report did, I come away with a completely different opinion that would support keeping Charles Street the way it is as a one-way street. And when I read the document most referenced in there, it's called One-Way Streets Are Better Than Two-Way, which is quite an odd thing to be having as the reference document, suggesting Charles Street should be two-way. It says pedestrians particularly benefit from one-way streets. They produce 163% more accidents than Sacramento. It goes on to talk about other cities in America. It even says that one study called One-Way Streets, quote, the most effective urban countermeasure to pedestrian accidents. It goes on to talk about numerous studies have shown that businesses actually do better with one-way streets than two-way. It goes on to talk about cities in America. Portland, 51% fewer accidents at intersections with one-way streets, 37% fewer at intersections. It found in Oregon, in a dozen cities, led to an average 10% fewer accidents in one-way streets, 23%, well, I won't go on, Sacramento, 14% fewer accidents. It goes on. How can we have such a divergent, with the same literature, interpreted by me, completely different from that GHD report?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Smith, for your question. As I'm not an expert in that report itself and the findings it's found, I think that I would have to take some further commentary or notice around the interpretation and how that has been interpreted in relation to what the City of Launceston is proposing to do around, as we've mentioned, with our city heart and so forth. So I couldn't speak to that personally on how that's been interpreted, but I can look into some further information around the actual reporting itself and where that sits with the Launceston's proposed plans for the city.
That would answer the question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Second question, so that was asking about calming measures, the suggestion that that's turning Charles Street into a two-way would make it calmer. This now is the same question relating to, and I heard Councillor Dawkins talk about blockies when they spoke to the City Heart Stage 2. So is there ever any evidence that turning Charles Street and Patterson into two-way streets would reduce blocky driving in the city? That's the question.
Sure. Well, I think that the way in which the City of Launceston is looking to address some social issues and commentary around the blocky route is around traffic calming and looking at those approaches to what very well might implement temporary structures, two-way changes. There are ways in which we're looking strategically at placing ourselves in the position to deter certain antisocial behaviours.
Certainly, thank you. But clearly, so there's no doubt it's any evidence that would suggest that turning Charles Street into two-way and Patterson into two-way would reduce the blockage. Thank you.
Mr. Smith, we can take that on notice as well to back that up with some actual information. Yeah.
Very much appreciated, Mr. Mayor. Thirdly, as you know, I work in the Brisbane Street Mall. When council installed the recycle bins through the mall, for the first 6 or 12 months, they just went in the general waste. There was no arrangement for actual recycling. That was addressed in time. But currently I noticed that about 5 o'clock in the morning, council has a contractor come into the mall a couple of times a week, and they take the recycling from the recycling bin, open up the rubbish bins and squash them in. And it creates a mess, a lot of spills, and as you can imagine, bottles and cans and go everywhere and make a mess. And then about 7 o'clock, the morning crew, it's a different crew, come in. That's the Ross Brent morning crew. And then they empty the rubbish, and that gets put in the truck and taken away. And then about an hour later, they come back, and then they bring the sweeper in. Because of the mess on the footpath around the bins, it's created by tipping 120-litre wheelie bin of recycling into the landfill. Then they have to come back and sweep. Should we go back to the old system? Maybe not have the recycling if it's an issue. Does that sound, the mess is phenomenal. They come back 3 times to address the recycling.
Yeah, I'll take that on notice as well, Mr. Smith, because we'll look into the process and the protocols around what that scheduling and maintenance looks like. So I would have to have a bit further look into that, but I appreciate the opportunity to. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any further comments from the floor? Okay, there being none, we will move through to agenda item number 9. We don't have any petitions or deputations that have been identified as a part of this agenda today. So we'll move into Planning Authority at 11. So under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993, Council acts as a planning authority in regards to items included in agenda item 11. At 11.1, we have 24 Bedford Street, Invermay. Before we get to the recommendation, I don't have anybody noted to speak, but is there any public commentary before the recommendation? There being none, we'll move forward to the recommendation, which is that Council grants a permit for change of use to visitor accommodation at 24 Bedford Street, Invermay, subject to the published conditions. May I have somebody please to move? Deputy Mayor? Seconded by Councillor Pentridge. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. And look, I've read through the officer's recommendation. I've read through the responses from representations in regard to the matter, and to be quite honest, other than if you philosophically have a disagreement between having residential versus short-term accommodation, this makes actually probably a better outcome for Bedford Street in regards to many things. In that A, the building won't be occupied probably 5 nights or 7 nights a week, in that it's short-term accommodation. The parking permit that was previously there for the residents of 24 Bedford Street has now been rescinded and will not be given back. There's 2-hour parking, so anybody who's parking there on short-term accommodation will need to meet with the short-term parking accommodation requirements. And therefore, to me, there was comment about that we don't police it. I think the officers properly addressed that on the basis that we do police that on at least a daily basis through there. So that those sorts of things done. So to me, the amenity of Bedford Street in some ways are actually improved by this actually us approving this today. Again, if you've got a philosophical view about short-term accommodation being taken out of the market, then that's a different issue. But based on our planning laws and so forth like that, that's not really, I think, a significant consideration for us to make today. It's about the amenity and the meeting of the planning scheme, and I believe all of the issues that were raised by the representatives have more than adequately been dealt with by the officer in their responses.
Thank you, Deputy. Councillor Pentridge is the seconder. Yep, thank you. Further comments around the table? A question, Councillor Harris.
Just a question for the planners in regard to, I guess, the short stay visitor accommodation in a residential area. Are there any rules that prohibit that, or are there excluded areas where that is not possible in the city, or is in fact that able to be, there's no overlay. It's any property can be turned into a short-term visitor accommodation.
Town Planner Duncan.
Thank you. Yes, thanks for that question. The short answer is that this is a general residential zone and visitor accommodation is provided specifically in the planning scheme for that zone, and whether it becomes a permitted use or a discretionary use simply relies on its ability to comply with the relevant acceptable solutions. Across the other zones in the scheme, there are some zones where visitor accommodation isn't allowed, but in the bulk of the zones, particularly areas where residential is envisaged, visitor accommodation is also allowed.
Thank you. Councillor Harris to speak.
Thank you very much for that. I thought that was the case. This is really a case of Launceston growing its visitor economy, and the fact that we haven't had a new hotel built since the silos, which is more than 5 years ago. As a consequence, we find that visitors do want an alternative style of accommodation. Hotels don't suit many family circumstances where you might have 2 adults and 2 children, and therefore the Airbnb is the right outcome. And as Councillor Mackenzie has said, this is more likely to be less utilised than someone who might have a 12-month rent on the property and perhaps be attending their local university just across Invermay Road. Whilst Airbnbs have a very bad reputation as being party houses, I think most are not. Most residents or occupiers of Airbnb are in fact rated every time they use the property. That is not the case with someone who rents on a 12-month contract. And not only that, it is also cleaned after every person has moved out, which again, a standard rental is not something that happens every week. So whilst I'm sure there are many people out there who feel that we shouldn't have more what could have been rental accommodation turned over to the short stay visitor accommodation, all we can hope is that those who've had their hotels approved are able to get them out of the ground, and particularly before 2028, when we see the arrival of the Tassie Devils. And I'm sure a much greater pressure will be brought to our accommodation here in Launceston. So happy to support this motion today.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you. Yes, reading through the representations, it's certainly understandable that people are concerned about what they feel to be a diminishing of their capacity to act in their community. But it's really not a matter for planning in this instance. So that sense of more security lighting, CCTV, not knowing whose car's on the street that might be in your spot or the spot that you prefer to be yours, even though that's not really how it works. These are the kind of things that can concern people. So we have to, I think it's really important we understand there is an impact in these kind of changes, but in this instance, this impact cannot be rectified by the planning scheme, and therefore I'll be supporting it today.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Any further comments around the table? A question, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. It is true that this is part of a strata plan or title, and that there is provision within that to assess whether this would have an impact, but that impact is only on other titles in the strata, is that correct?
Town Planner Duncan.
Thank you for that question. Yes, specifically the clause says visitor accommodation within a strata scheme must not cause an unreasonable loss of residential amenity to long-term residents occupying other strata lots within the strata scheme. So it only applies to the adjoining strata properties.
And then how is it we can assess that impact when it hasn't occurred yet?
When we're assessing the impact of that, we have to first consider what the existing amenity is likely to be, and you'll notice from the representations provided, they were already talking about diminished levels of amenity. But we'll also go on broad experience from other visitor accommodation uses around the city and what impact they're anticipated and have actually demonstrated over the years that we've had them. And based on that, our conclusion really is that in general terms, there is very little difference in impact between long-term residential and visitor accommodation use.
Has there been any cases where Launceston Council has been asked to assess the impacts of a visitor accommodation site in a strata corporate body when there has been that impact or someone has been concerned? Is that something that would come to council?
Can we just clarify, are you saying, have we assessed?
I'm saying in a situation...
Have we assessed visitor accommodation in strata before, or is this about noise and amenity impacts from Airbnbs or...
I'm saying yes. In a situation such as this that has been previously approved, have there been consequent complaints that have come to council because the impact has been, let's say, a block of flats, one of them's an Airbnb, and then someone decides to complain about the noise or the impact?
Those things would go through our health team. I don't think we have the specifics on evidence of number of complaints from stratas. Our health team do from time to time receive noise complaints from single dwellings and presumably Airbnbs, but we don't have specifics around that at this point.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. Councillor Professor Raze, did you have a question? Or to speak? Okay, Councillor Walker.
Yeah, no, I will speak. And look, I understand. I, in fact, live next door to an Airbnb, and you do get a variety of differences, I suppose, of approach that people have because we're all different. Some people do, make a bit more noise than others. I happen to know the owner. I get on well with him. He's always said, let me know if there's any issues. And so that's a fairly comfortable arrangement for me. It doesn't mean that I don't get impacted. It just means that, and in fact, well, I won't go into the details, but nonetheless, this does occur, and it's not a strata title situation. My concern is that on the one hand, the planning scheme does have the capacity to assess it within a strata scheme, and yet on the other hand, if there is a complaint, it doesn't come back through the planning department, it goes somewhere else within the council, who aren't necessarily going to look at what it's been approved for or the provisions under the Planning Scheme Act. That's my concern, and that would be the concern of any one of us in this situation. For the residents, the changes, and I know that there's already a couple of other Airbnbs in that street, but the changes are that you've gone from a private residential street to a street where a business is being conducted. And that is a change. It's a significant change, especially if it's next door to you. That's where the problem lies. And I know that it's permitted under the planning scheme, and we're not talking about that. The only provision I think that this could be objected to is that case of it being part of a strata, and then only affecting the other lots in the strata. So, having said all that, I certainly empathise with people who are feeling somewhat threatened by this and potentially will be threatened by this. That's where the problem lies, I suppose. I'm of a mind to support it, but I do want to air those concerns, and I think it's important that they are aired. I don't think there's any other provision under which this can be refused or could be even challenged. And I will retire from this by just asking one final question, and that is, does Launceston Council have any intention of seeking a way to have some further say in the amount of properties that can or will be converted to accommodation rather than private dwellings? Have we had any further investigation in that area?
And the simple answer to that is no, not since the last council resolution when the paper was brought to the council, and I forget when, 18 months ago, or of that nature. There were some recommendations in that talked about potential ratings and other things, but the advice at that time, from my recollection, was that there was no planning-related ability to modify. Now, the powers that were available to council were more in the differential rates and other things like that, which were brought up at that time.
I'll just add to that if I can. To Richard's point, there is a differential rate that can be applied to short-term accommodation. The mechanics and the administration behind that are extremely cumbersome. So we're lobbying the state government to provide some better data and a better framework of which we can do that. We know Hobart have done it. They've had significant issues with that. So there is a Legat working group that is looking at it from that differential rating point of view. So the wheels are turning in that sphere, but as Richard said, in a planning point of view, not much to update you on, unfortunately.
Thank you, Acting CEO. Councillor Professor Rose.
I would like also to raise my concern about another property turned into short-term accommodation. That means another property lost from the long-term accommodation. And we know we are living at a time when there is less affordable houses, less affordable rented accommodation. And we heard the stories about how people have been evicted. Some people turn also homeless. This is major concern because there is an acceleration of this changing property into short-term accommodation for the last 4 years. We have to recognize as well 2/3 of accommodation, of short-term accommodation, comes from long-term accommodation. So you can't say it hasn't had impact on housing affordability and rent prices. Look at the vacancy rate in Launceston. In 2016, there was 3.5% vacancy rate. In 2022, down to 1%. Well, now I think it's even worse, so it's less than 1%. What happened to house rentals? In 2016, median rent was $300. In 2022, up to by $100, and now it's even worse. So we have to, I think, reflect from time to time, and that we should look at our regulation, whether we should look at the impact of short-term accommodation on rental availability. The other, Councillor Walker raised about noises, standard complaint in short-term accommodation, and I recognize the reports and the answer questions about that the majority of visitor accommodation users are well-behaved people simply choosing an alternative to hotel. I quite accept that most of them well-behaved, but if I live in a hotel, if there are noises, I ring the receptionist and they will go and try to address that issue. When you've got short-term accommodation, who do you go? Do you ring the police? Yep. Why are we using our police to use their resources to address these issues? So all I would like to make comment is that I think we need to be concerned about increasing short-term accommodation, and we have to review it regularly. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Were there any further comments from the floor? Okay. Anything further to close, Deputy Mayor?
Just to say, look, I acknowledge the comments made by my fellow councillors, and I guess it's a philosophical issue again regarding short-term accommodation versus long-term residential. It's been assessed under the planning scheme. It meets the scheme. I think there's another short-term accommodation a few doors up the road, so it's not as if it's sitting there out on its own doing something differently. So I think it's clearly it meets its requirements under the planning scheme, and therefore should approve it today.
Thank you. Okay, we'll put it to the vote then. So all of those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Thank you. At agenda item 12, as we now no longer sit as planning authority, announcements by the Mayor, they are published as a part of this readily available agenda. So putting it to the councillors. Councillor reports. Councillor Kai. Sure.
Thank you. So on Monday, the 18th of November, I was invited to join the Communities for Children, Kanaluka, at the Arc City Mission for their annual Children's Voice Leadership Summit. I participated alongside Deputy Mayor Councillor Mackenzie and Councillor Lowe from the Georgetown Council. We worked in small groups with the grade 3s and 4 students sharing their insights and thoughtful views about their community. This program is supporting children to understand that their voice has influence and they can have a positive difference in their community. And thanks to the team, Kate, Emily and Tom, all the children were very comfortable sharing their thoughts on various issues, including how council can help improve children's mental health. Last Thursday, along with most of the councillors in this chamber and our CEO, I attended the Local Government Association of Tasmania's general meeting. One particular motion that sparked significant discussion and was voted on unanimously was the rejection of the state government's proposal for the Development Assessment Panel. The state government believes that the DAP will remove politics from the planning process. However, I feel that they are removing community input from planning decisions and eliminating appeal rights. I hope the objection from not only just the 29 councils, but also the 92% of the submissions opposing the Development Assessment Panel, that we are heard and clearly that Tasmania does not support this proposal. This Monday, we held the Heritage Sketch Awards ceremony in Civic Square, and it was an incredible turnout of all the children with their families. This year's competition has received over 300 entries, and it's amazing to see all the students who have put so much time, effort, heart and soul into their artworks. Thanks to Dr. David Bainan, Rosalind Ives and Henry Watson for taking on the difficult task of judging. The Heritage Sketch competition encourages our city's children and young people to embrace our heritage, encouraging the next generation to maintain our commitment to appreciating and protecting this heritage. Importantly, it captures the artistic talents of these students as we celebrate and showcase our iconic places, buildings and natural wonders. Launceston has a rich history, the story of which is told through our landscapes, streetscapes and buildings. I would like to congratulate not only the winners, but also our Heritage Officer Jess and her team for the marvellous job of putting this competition together. And lastly, and most importantly, thank you to the 300 young artists for being our heritage champions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kai. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, look, on the 17th of November, I represented the council in my role on the National Trust heritage property at Franklin Village, in joining them in serving the volunteers afternoon tea. And it was wonderful to see probably 25 volunteers there for the day. They are the people who keep the gardens of Franklin House as immaculate as they are, but also the house guides and many others. One of the only unfortunate things was that I probably was only the third youngest in the room at 63. So there is opportunity there for anyone listening. If you want to go and volunteer, there are plenty of job roles in the National Trust, whether it be a house guide, whether it be working in the kitchen serving afternoon teas, or in fact out in the garden. I'll also just like to say a big thank you to the council's clean-up team, particularly Lee out there at the depot. Sally's ride happened on Sunday. One of the rides went up the Northern Rail Trail from Mowbray, Dover Village, past Mayfield up to Rochalee, and Lee's crew went in there and cleaned it all up last Friday. It looks amazing, and I do encourage those who might live in the area now that it is clean, let us keep it clean, because it is certainly something that can become a great community asset. And that will just about do me. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Harris. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. And like Councillor Kai, I just want to acknowledge the work done by the CEO's wife, the acting CEO's wife last week in the Children's Voices Summit out at the Arc. I think it was a fantastic morning with Star of the Sea, I think it was, and St Leonard's schools. And listening to those children, amongst adults expressing their views on the world. And what I think was really encouraging, there were some that weren't so forward, that needed a little bit of prompting, but they actually got into the swing of the conversation as the morning went on. So hopefully it built confidence among them that they actually have a voice that they could use as well. So absolutely fantastic. On Tuesday night last week, I had the pleasure of having dinner with some ICADA guests, our sister city, who have flown out here to go out to Drew Kelly's place at Mole Creek to learn about wombat looking after. So some of the zookeepers from ICADA were out last weekend, and I think they had a fantastic meeting and a good look around, which was taken around by Tony around the city. I think they went and saw the macaque monkeys, went to the gorge and various other things as they did, but certainly they're looking forward to their 60th anniversary of our sister city relationship and coming out to visit us in February next year. Likewise, the Legat Conference for Managers and CEOs and mayors and deputy mayors were on Wednesday, and a further Legat meeting on the Thursday, which I think was great. It was good to see the support of the Launceston City Council councillors going along to those events, and a large part of the day for mayors and deputy mayors were around psychosocial health, which was very interesting in many ways, more than one. And just want to comment on the Heritage Sketch Award that Councillor Kai mentioned. I sent that little sticker out to my family when it was announced, and my grandson, who's 6 years old at Trevelyan Primary, drew a sketch and sent it in. Now, I have no idea how he went, but I was very proud of it. He drew a photo of the King's Bridge, and noting that it was very important to him because he had to go over that every day to get home. But just the importance that they actually see it as a 6-year-old, that heritage nature, and it's fantastic. I think a fantastic initiative of the Heritage Committee to, I think, get the young people of our community to actually understand the wealth of heritage that we actually have in the city. So congratulations. I'm sure it was a great day on Monday. Unfortunately, my knee was limiting me to where I could go on Monday, but I wish I'd been here.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further reports, councillor reports? Okay, we'll move through the agenda then to 14. At 14.1, it's councillors' questions on notice, which are published as a part of this agenda. So at 14.2, councillors' questions without notice. Any councillors' questions without notice? Oh, Councillor McMahon.
So I just have a question around the cancelled carols by candlelight. Given the organising committee for the cancelled carols by candlelight received $15,000 from council events funding, will council be seeking a full explanation as to why the event was cancelled at the 11th hour, and a full report on what work had been completed for the event, and when were participants notified of its cancellation, and has any of the funding been expended, and when will the funding be returned to council?
Sure, absolutely. Yes, that report can be sought.
Thank you.
Any further questions around the table? There being none, we'll move forward to 15 and 16. I don't believe we have any notices of motions or community reports that have been identified as a part of this agenda. So looking at 17, Community and Place Network, 17.1. We have the Municipal Energy Emergency Management Coordinator and Deputy Municipal Emergency Management Coordinator roles, with that recommendation being that Council nominates Linda Robbins as the Municipal Emergency Management Coordinator and nominates Michael Newby as the Deputy Municipal Emergency Management Coordinator. At 3, it recommends the appointment of both of these roles for the period of 3 years and rescinds the previous appointments. Somebody to move, Deputy Mayor. Seconded by Councillor Harris. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. As being chair of the Emergency Management Committee, I've worked with Linda for the last 2 years in regards to her role as supporting that thing, and she's got a great knowledge of what goes on in the emergency aspects, and I think she's very appropriate for that role. And knowing the quality of Michael Newby, I'm very comfortable that he's the person that can actually fulfil that role as well.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Harris. Anything further around the table? Okay, putting it to the vote then. All of those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. Okay. 17.2, we have the Development Assessment Panel submissions, with the recommendation being that council notes the submissions made by council. And I will just make note that this recommendation is to note the report, but noting that it is a significantly publicised event. I will allow commentary around it if felt, but I will ask for that to be concise and to the point. So somebody to move the noting of the submission. Councillor Walker. Seconded by Councillor Pentridge. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, I do with pleasure note this submission, and I will say that I did push for us to have something in our agenda so that we could publicly acknowledge our position in regards to development assessment panel legislation that has now passed through State Parliament only mere days after the submissions closed. And we resubmitted essentially our first submission, which was probably 12 months ago, which was at the time draft legislation. And we resubmitted that because of the short time frame, it did not allow us to put a full submission in. So I do thank council officers for working to get that submission in. I will note that Launceston Council has approved many major developments and has done so diligently by our staff and consultatively with our community. These are things that are under risk of the community losing if development assessment panels become legislated law by passing the upper house. So I will keep it brief, thank you, Chair, and I will also note that I will be asking Launceston Council to write to upper house members to reiterate our position in regards to our current opposition in its present form, noting that all of local council, and I was at the Local Government Association of Tasmania meeting where there was a unanimous decision, very similar to Launceston Council's position, that of course we're open to discussion on these issues. Of course we wish to collaborate with the state government on these things, but we don't wish to be dictated to, and we need to make that point patently clear, because what's being eroded is local democracy, but also residential participation, community participation in planning decisions, which is really a cornerstone of the process that we currently have. As I will repeat, Launceston Council has approved many major developments. We have not had a problem in that regard. We haven't politicised that issue. We've dealt with it on a case-by-case example, and unfortunately, I believe the opposite is now true, and that the state government, in doing this, has indeed run the risk of politicising the issue themselves, because it will now, many of those decisions will ultimately be in the hands of the Minister of the day and not of elected officials in a local area. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. Councillor Pentridge is the seconder. Thank you. Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you. I rise to support the words of Councillor Walker. I do think that Tasmanians have seen state governments in the past make terrible decisions about major projects, legislation. The division that's been caused in our state by some attempts to be able to bring particular developments into the next level of government, and the thousands of people marching on the streets when that's happened before. And I'm shocked to think that it's not happening again. I know that there's a lot of people, stakeholders in this, who have done an amazing job using digital technology to be able to spread their message, create surveys, get people involved. But it certainly feels this time that perhaps state governments are getting better at this, because I believe it will pass. I think the writing's on the wall that it will pass. And what this means for our community, we stand here as councillors, or sit, we have people from the community speak to us in the room. It's often said that local government is the closest level of government to people, and it actually literally is. And that does mean something. It means something to look someone in the eye when you make a decision. And I think state parliament is somewhat removed from that. And a minister and another agency is even further removed. And I've seen too many times the long arm of a minister reach in and make a decision that really should have been around policy, process, and what the community's expectations are. The community expects local government to make these decisions. We know that because we're regularly represented too by people who say, we need you to stop this. And we can't, because that's not how the planning works. But we can at least be there and discuss that with people and go through that process. And I think sometimes that's just as important as what the ultimate outcome is. So for me, this is, I completely support our application, our submission. I'm disappointed that this has come to this. I understand that we're likely to lose this one. And I do think it will have a material and long-term impact on the way that local government governs for its representatives and its community.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Any further comments around the table? Deputy Mayor.
I wasn't going to speak, but I will just briefly, because I'm standing to support the submission that was put in by us as well, and the conversation that went on last week at the Legat meeting. And I guess my fundamental issue is, I mean, they say they're trying to take politics out of it. I think it does exactly the opposite of that. I think what I like about what comes to this table now, sometimes we're misguided in what the planning scheme is actually about, and we talk about things which are not always relevant to the planning scheme. But the beauty about it is everybody sits in that back row there who have got a representation. We listen and hear their comments. We take on board those comments. We feed back how we see that sitting in regards to the planning scheme as we see it. So we've got that community interface that actually tries to explain why we've got to go down a particular path, which may or not necessarily satisfy what they want as an outcome. But the reality of it is we're here close personal. We understand the community context of what we're actually discussing. So I think that'll be a real shame, and I appreciate it's probably only big projects that are going to get out that, but they sometimes are the ones that need the scrutiny and actually need to have the public have an opportunity to speak and be listened to by us. Now, I may take a particular position which is different to the person who's sitting in the audience. Happy with that, provided I've got a reason for doing that. But it's good that they can actually hear me and they can hear others who can support their way of thinking. So I think it's really taking away that really important community connection by going to DAPS on some of these things. So I'm very pleased that we've put forward our representation in the first place. We reiterated that. We stood by that at the LGAT meeting last Thursday. I'm disappointed that the government's still proceeding with it. They've got their reasons for doing it, but I think that we have our reasons for supporting maintaining that being a council prerogative.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Further comments? Councillor Professor Razzo?
I also today like to support that and raise my concern about passing, approval to government, central government, when it is like a local issue. And we have shown the council play an important role in planning matter, and especially in big projects, because that's how we communicate with our community. More importantly, we raise the concern of the community in our discussion. My main concern is that by passing it to central government, that will only mean they will look at the interest of the few at the expense of the interests of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Anything to close, Councillor Walker? Okay, putting it to the vote then. All those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. Okay, we don't have anything for our Creative Arts and Cultural Service Network in this agenda today, but we go to 19, which is Infrastructure and Assets Network. 19.1, we have the on-street dining fee waiver related to George Street parking parklets on the dining decks. We have the recommendation that Council receive and note the report and waive on-street dining fees for businesses within the George Street parklets trial area who wanted to participate but are unable to have a parklet dining deck. It's been moved by Councillor Harris, seconded. Councillor Kai. Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Oh, do you want to ask a question first? Or?
Okay.
Before I speak, I'll...
Yeah, no, I'll have to ask a question first.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, with
I
a
guess
question.
it's outlined in the risk implications, perception of unfairness by businesses not offered a waiver. So I'm just wondering how we deal with that perception, how we might deal with that with others in other places who don't feel that they've been afforded that benefit.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor, I was just looking at the report. I actually updated the answer inside that, but it appears that it hasn't saved when I've done that. I think the way that we'll manage that is we'll be offering a reduction in fees for those who wish to take up on-street dining. Was that not part of this report?
Project Manager.
Hello. The way that we're dealing with it is that it's only the businesses who specifically applied to have a parklet. They're within the study area or the trial area, so it's just a very small section of George Street that was originally offered this. It'll only be for the 3 months of the trial, so it's quite a short period, and as it's a pro rata application of fees, it's a pretty small sort of consolation prize to those businesses that really wanted to be a part of the parklet trial but just aren't able to because they simply don't have the space in front of their business to be able to do that.
Thanks. I thought just being a trial is probably a good answer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. To the mover, Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Yes, this is the on-street dining parklets in George Street is limited just to a part of George Street, not all of it. I think from memory it's from Patterson to Brisbane Street from memory. It's part of City Heart. City Heart is the area bounded by Symmetry, Wellington, Elizabeth and Tamer Streets, so it's a much larger area. And part of it is to make the CBD more people-focused and more people-friendly. So the idea of the parklets is the parking spots will be replaced with the parklet style of dining area that we have in Patterson Street outside the cafe that's called Inside Cafe. Thank you. I was looking for help. And so a couple of those. And clearly there's some people who currently have dining, but because they don't have parking meters, but they can't participate. So hence we're just waiving those fees. It is a trial, like all good trials, you learn from them. And so it will be interesting to see how this goes. I think it's an exciting thing, and perhaps just to answer Robin Smith's question about City Heart, if in fact you convert to one-way streets, which are very efficient at channeling traffic in sometimes 3 lanes in one direction, when you introduce 2 lanes of traffic, one in each direction, the idea of a blocky route is that you're racing your mate who's beside you, and suddenly this is taken away. And so, in fact, the introduction of 2-way streets will in fact stop the blocky route from being anywhere near as much fun because you'll only have one lane in each direction, all of which will make the CBD a much friendlier place for people to be and in fact to enjoy street dining. So very happy to support this and I look forward to its success and it being rolled out further within the City Heart area.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Councillor Kai is the seconder.
I agree with Councillor Harris. So I reckon this is going to be a great idea to start with, and it will also liven the CBD. It's only a 3-month trial, so if it works out, we could expand to a larger area. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kai. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, and I know I'm really just going to say something which I know has already been addressed, but thank you for that. Just I think it's important that we do note that there are other businesses other than hospitality businesses that live in that area, and part of what we're doing is dislocating a loading zone to enable this to happen. So ensuring that those businesses who require the loading zones are not adversely implicated by this trial is really important, particularly as one of them has a significant amount of business that trades through their place, and that's extremely important to them. So I know Anna's addressing that and had discussions with the owners of the property, so good consultation process going on. So I just want to acknowledge that, but noting that there are bigger things that we just need to make sure that we don't lose sight of as part of this process.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you. I do support what is happening, but I would actually like to see a blanket waiver across the city for a 3-month period. I think if we're trying to encourage people in one area to attempt to try outside dining, I think there's a lot of places around the city that would probably benefit from encouraging that same ethos. So if that's at all possible, I would love to have that considered. Thank you.
Acting General Manager, comments around a blanket waiver?
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. We'd have to look at the number of businesses with current on-street dining permits, and we can come back to you around a cost/budget implication of that. But certainly I believe, as the project manager pointed out, it is our intention to move through the city as part of Place Plan. And I think it would be really beneficial to gather some data around if this works well, and perhaps once we've fine-tuned our approach a little bit, we can make sure it's ready to go before we roll it out broad scale.
Thank you. Councillor Dawkins?
And just on that, and not directly related to the motion, but look, the critical mass is really important with this. We've seen sort of one parklet stuck out there in 3 lanes of traffic. It kind of doesn't work. It kind of couldn't. And we've been talking about this for about 10 years too. You know, there's a couple of areas that definitely would benefit from. The Kingsway was perfect for a while, that businesses have ebbed and flowed in that area. But it is about having that kind of nimble attitude and capacity to be able to go where something makes sense now, rather than sort of do the trial and hope it makes sense when we do it. So I know we've got really good people working on this. I've got all faith and power of this council to make this work.
Thank you. Councillor Walker?
Yes, I do congratulate staff for bringing this forward. Change is never easy. We're all used to the status quo at times. I'm sure if you had a blank map of the CBD and handed it out to every business owner, they'd all draw different things on there. This is the process. It's a trial. We'll learn some great things from it. I wish it all success, and and to see it expand. If through you, Chair, Councillor McMahon wishes to bring forward a motion to waive those fees for 3 months, I think that would certainly be, as long as we can afford it, an appropriate approach, given the time of year, increase on-street dining and some equity around the whole process, and encouraging the process to succeed. And through you also, Chair, I can only presume that Councillor Harris must have some experience with blocky routes, because he seems to know a lot about them.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Any further comments around the table? Anything further to close, Councillor Harris?
Yes, I'll only confirm that, yes, well, I was 17 once as well, and the blocky route was still in place back in 1977 or 78 when I got my licence, I think. So look, happy that this is here, happy for Councillor to support Councillor McMahon's future motion to extend it, because it is in fact, street dining is a very interesting thing. People often think, why would you bother with street dining when you're going to have a smelly car or truck or whatever? And I remember in my trip to Copenhagen, they thought street dining would last for 2 months of the year, because they have snow for at least 2 months of the year that settles on the streets in Copenhagen. They were stunned to find that not only the 2 months of summer, but in fact 10 months of the year outdoor dining is successful, and it's only when the snow forces them to put the rain shelters down because they can't hold the weight of the snow does the dining have to move inside. They simply provide outdoor heaters, lap rugs, and away they go. And so if Copenhagen can do it close to the 60th degree parallel, we at 42 degrees south can certainly enjoy outdoor dining as well. So.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Okay, putting it to the vote then. All of those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. At 19.2, we have the Launceston Flood Authority report. With that recommendation coming to us that council receives the Launceston Flood Authority quarterly report from July to September 24. Somebody to move. Councillor Walker is moved, seconded by Councillor Pentridge. Councillor Walker.
To speak just briefly, thank you, Chair. Apart from the regular items that you might expect to see there, including the River Health Action Plan, rectification works on levies, I note with interest the severe weather event of August and September, where a review of the event was conducted, highlighting 9 key areas and identified lessons, which I think are really important sort of learnings. The redundancy, especially the redundancy of infrastructure systems during elongated power outages. This is something that affected a wide swathe of the city, but none more important than essential services such as pumps and levy systems, town halls, things like that, where power was disrupted. And I think there's a lot of learnings to be had from that. As much as we might like to think that we are emergency ready and do a lot of work in that area, there's always more learnings to be had financially, in emergency services and otherwise. But also listed there, development of a QV-MAG disaster plan, communications to community during the power outages, and learnings around staff fatigue, and improvements to technology and systems. And I note also that we have the continued rollout of our CCTV monitoring And I will just finish it with a question, if I may. Thank you, Chair. When that infrastructure is fully rolled out, will that be operated, attended to by the Flood Authority or by Launceston Council? That CCTV?
So, in an emergency, the CCTV cameras and things that have been mentioned in here will be operated by council staff, essentially on behalf of the Flood Authority to perform that emergency function.
Great. Councillor Pentridge?
I've never been a supporter of the Flood Authority, and my recollection is that, having read the current report, what my memory was that Flood Authority also had some responsibilities where the river was concerned. We all listened to a very passionate lady today talking about Inveresk. It's a pity that passion couldn't be rubbed off on some of our authorities, particularly when we keep saying that it's not if, it's when. I would suggest that if anyone from the Flood Authority is listening, they go back and read their agenda. They do have a response there, not just to the levy, but also to the river. So I wish they'd have a look at that and read what they're really there for. And if they're not prepared to address the river, then maybe we ought to relook at that and get someone that is. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pentridge. Any further comments around the table, around the report? Anything further to close, Councillor Walker? Okay, putting it to the vote then. All of those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. At 20, we have Organisational Services Network. 20.1, we have the revised delegation from Council to CEO, Building Act 2016 and Building Regulations 2016. Now, before we do get into the recommendation, I might throw over to you, Lou, for just a little bit of a summary of what this recommendation is.
So with regards to this recommendation, basically back in 2017, the decision, there were a wide range of functions and powers being delegated to the CEO, but due to the recent changes of the Building Act, some of those functions have transferred back to council, so it's no longer a CEO function, and hence one of the recommendations is for the functions and powers that are redundant to be basically rescinded. So basically, the CEO can't have it, don't need it anymore because it's no longer for him to delegate. So that's in summary what this recommendation is.
Sure. Thank you. So getting to the recommendation is that Council notes the decision to delegate Council powers and functions from Council to the CEO made at item 19.4 at the Council meeting on the 23rd of January 2017, and in doing so revokes part of the 2017 decision. So somebody to move. Deputy Mayor's moved, seconded by Councillor Harris. Deputy Mayor, I think you were there.
I would have thought Councillor Pentridge was all over revoking something. Anyway, look, I think this is just common sense. At the end of the day, the power's no longer required because it's built into the Building Act. So I think it's just an administrative issue to sort that out.
Sure. Thank you. Anything further? Anything further from the table, Councillor Pentridge?
I just think for some clarity, giving appropriate people the authority to vote, it was never the question. It was giving the power to people that never really should have had that power was always my problem.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Pentridge. Any further comments around the table? Councillor Walker?
A question, if I may.
Okay,
I may have misunderstood, but I don't think it's just simply a revocation of delegations, but it's a re-delegation of delegations. A reapplying of delegations, if I'm correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So basically, we thought the best, cleanest way to go about doing it is instead of just amending one part of the previous delegation, we just rescind that one part, but just all the existing powers that still remains with the CEO continues, apart from that one that we're taking out.
Thank you.
Just to speak very briefly.
Yes, Councillor Walker. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, look, I think it is important for this council to always be aware of the delegations it gives. These are powers that are vested in the people around this table for very good reason. There's no reason why we shouldn't, on a yearly basis, review delegations. I know that a lot of them are very stock standard. I don't particularly want the power to order a building to be demolished if it's, decrepit or whatever it might be. But it is important to be aware of those, I think, as a part of a fully functioning council. And so I know that every time there's a new council elected, for example, after elections, those delegations do have to be reviewed. We now have a new CEO, so it might be an appropriate time to review those, but it's important that we are always aware of what those powers are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Anything further to close, Deputy Mayor? Okay, putting it to the vote then. All of those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. At 20.2, we have budget amendment. As Finance Manager Kelty comes forward, just like what Lily, just a little brief summary, a little explanation of the recommendation before we get to it.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. These are the monthly changes to our operational and capital budgets. There's not much in here that isn't a procedural matter. There's a couple of small adjustments where we've identified expenditure that isn't capital in nature and needs to move between capital and operations. And there's some additional funding received for the QV mag that we're recognising the budget for, so we can record the expenditure against it. And then there's a summary of the adjustments made by the CEO reported to Council each month that don't alter the operational bottom line.
Great, thank you. Okay, so that recommendation is that Council, by absolute majority, approves the published changes to the 24-25 statutory estimates. Somebody to move. Deputy Mayor has moved, seconded by Councillor Walker. Deputy Mayor.
I can't give a better explanation than the officers did.
Thank you. Anything, Councillor Walker? Any further comments around the table? Okay, putting it to the vote. All those in favour? All councillors present, the motion is carried. At 20.3, we have public interest disclosure procedures. Again, Lucas, I wouldn't mind if you were able to give us a little bit of a summary before we do get to the recommendation, having not seen something like this before.
Thank you, Mayor. So the recommendation is to approve a revised version of the procedures with just minor amendments because this procedure is already in place. So just to approve it and to note that this procedure that's before you has already been approved by the Ombudsman.
Thank you. So the recommendation is that Council approves the public interest disclosure procedures. They're published as a part of this agenda, so somebody please to move. Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Harris. Deputy Mayor, anything to comment?
Again, I think the office has said it all. I mean, it's something, whistleblower, and it's actually trying just to protect people who do wish to make disclosures. It explains who they can make disclosures to, depending on who they are, and how those disclosures will be dealt with through the process, how they'll be investigated, and how the persons who are making those disclosures are protected.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Harris? Anything from the table? Okay, putting it to the vote then. All those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. Looking at our monthly financial performance report, I love how we split these ones up so the boys had to get up and down a couple of times. 20.4. The recommendation is that Council notes the report outlining both capital and operational results for the period ending 30th of October. Somebody to move. Councillor Harris has moved, seconded. Deputy Mayor. Councillor Harris?
Again, this is just quite procedural, just moving some figures from operational to capital, and also reporting up till the end of October, just how things have been progressing. The surplus, $718,000 per annum, favourable result, with a year-to-date of $727,000, which is, I think, somewhere on task for where we're expected to be. And yeah, it's really just reporting how we're going for the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I do, because we had a conversation about this at Audit Committee during the week about reporting of our results, and I think they're coming monthly as opposed to quarterly, I think, in future, so we're going to see this more frequently. I guess from a meaningfulness point of view, at the moment, we're showing we're tracking significantly ahead of budget in regards to how we're doing. Some of those differences will be timing differences and things that we expected to either earn or spend haven't occurred yet but will occur later in the year. And there'll be some which will be permanent in nature in that we've probably saved on salaries and wages where we've had vacancies and things like that. So I think that over time, and we've just got to get, I think, to a level of sophistication where we can sit and look at these budgets and we can say, okay, well, these are the permanent differences up and down, which based on the things that are going to right themselves, we're trending towards either a better or a worse result than what we thought. So I think this is still work in progress. I appreciate that, and it's not easy at this time of year to know exactly what is and what isn't permanent. And I guess putting some of those in your back pocket is a good idea where you don't know, but there's certainly some that we know specifically that we've already saved on or we've already overspent on, and we should be aware of that, I think, as a council going forward. So I think there's some real refinement on this, I think, which is a really good start, and I think as we go through the year, I think will keep us much better abreast so we don't get with a great big, huge beneficial result at the end of the year that we weren't expecting, or likewise the other way around. I think what it also does for me, that if we also find that we're actually tracking well ahead of budget, we can then look and say, okay, well, the things that are not in the budget, which we'd like to do, that we can maybe consider because the budget's likely to afford us that ability to do it without impinging upon the ratepayers in later rate increases that we've got to do. Anyway, look, I think it's a good report, but I still think from a refinement point of view, from us making decisions going into the future, I think we can just refine that a little bit more about what's permanent and what's timing.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Anything further from the table? No, he was the seconder. No? Councillor Walker?
I seconded the other one, that's what it was. Yes, I'm back to reality now, and I just, without reiterating what Deputy Mayor said, yes, certainly in the audit panel there, one thing you learn is that the pendulum swings, and the further it swings one way, the further it's going to come back the other. And I think it's about, steadying that process as much as possible. When it came to the earlier item that I was thinking of, when it comes to budget amendments, yeah, that's also the case. We're a large organisation, and necessarily so, there will be those types of amendments that come through, even though it has been noted, I suppose, in the audit panel that, we do have a significant amount of those types of amendments. We also are a significantly sized council, and I think that's somewhat appropriate, given our size geographically and numerically. So when it comes to the financial performance report here, similarly, yes, there's times when we are perhaps underemployed, and I think we're probably heading towards a time now where more jobs are being filled and will be filled and advertised and filled. So we'll definitely see some changes there as well over the next 6 to 9 months.
Thank you. Any other comments around the table? Anything to close, Councillor Harris? Okay, putting it to the vote then. All those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. At 20.5, we have council meeting schedule and update of council meeting policy, frequency and commencement time. I've got the recommendation in here, or the decision statement is to consider the 2025 schedule of council meetings and workshops and changes to council meeting policy. Somebody to move. No. Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Harris to start the discussion, seconded by Councillor Pentridge. Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Yes, I'll move this so that we can at least discuss the item of the scheduling of our council meetings. What is put to us to start with is a proposal to have just monthly meetings. I will foreshadow that should this fail, I will be moving a subsequent motion which will have council meetings on a 3 weekly meeting schedule. And I think everyone has been given a copy of that for a 3 weekly meeting schedule instead of the current fortnightly meeting schedule, which is what we have been operating on for the 6 years that I have been on council, and also for the, I guess that was the expectation when people put their hand up to be elected to council, that they would in fact be sitting in a meeting every 2 weeks and a workshop every other week. Now, what is happening is there is a lot of work in workshops where you are given a lot of background information, and the council staff are finding preparation for a meeting to be almost a continual cycle, being on a fortnightly basis. So the option has been presented to us to reduce that cycle to enable council staff to perhaps not always be running like the mouse inside the wheel, but actually being able to do some other things before they have to start meeting preparation again. However, I do feel that that provides less public scrutiny for council. So whilst I have moved this motion, I will not be supporting it in its current form of monthly council meetings. I will in fact be advocating for a three-weekly cycle, probably for 6 months as a trial to see where we go. But we don't know what we don't know. We have been on this two-week meeting cycle for quite a while. Some meetings are short. I think there's the number that I can talk about where we've got out of under an hour would probably be less than 10 in the last 6 years. Many of the meetings have gone for 3 and 4 hours. If you have less meetings, then those times will be longer. Although there'll be less formalities of the mayor opening the meeting and everything else, I do feel that moving to monthly meetings is perhaps a step too far for our community, and perhaps a change to a 3-weekly cycle of meetings is perhaps an appropriate trial in 2025. But that's where I'm going to leave it at the moment. Look forward to seeing what our other councillors around the table wish to say about it. It might be a bit messy, but hopefully that we will come to an agreed position, and we will come up with a meeting agenda for next year in 2025, whether that be a formal council meeting every fortnight, every 3 weeks, or in fact once a month. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Councillor Pentridge is the seconder.
I can't totally agree with my colleague here. I don't really see this about us as the representatives of the community. I see this as a very practical sense where I think our staff should have some input. I can understand that they are flat out, and I've been led to believe that we no sooner finish one council session and they start working on the next one. But now I would have preferred a suggestion that maybe we give it a try for a 4-week period, but if it doesn't work, we can go back. It's not hedged in stone, but I think if we're going to take the staff into consideration, and I can't help thinking that sometimes some of the things that's been put to us maybe didn't really need to, they're just filling the paperwork up. So I'll be supporting 4-week or
monthly. Yep.
Longer 4-week, once every 4 weeks, for a period of time. Let's see how it works. And I'm hoping the rest of my colleagues take some consideration how the staff feel. And it's all about productivity and what we achieve, not the amount of time we spend looking at it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pentridge. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. And again, we've discussed 3 different options in our council workshop. One was to stay in the status quo, one was to move to 4 weeks, which has been put forward here, and the other one was a 3-weekly time schedule. I take on board the comments made by the CEO in that presentation in regards to timeliness of it is the amount of work that's required by staff to actually put together the council papers. I think we also had a conversation at the end of last meeting where we talked about the efficiency and how well we actually run a meeting, as to whether we can be more efficient in the way that we actually move through a meeting to get through it more efficiently. So, and I think there are options. To me, the major consideration in changing this is simply that we have a process in regard to our planning scheme that requires timeliness of meeting DAs which have actually been represented against, and there are time limits in which we need to actually meet. I'm assured that we can probably in the main deal with that, but I'm sure there's going to be the occasional one that's going to fit between the timelines that we need to do to meet the statutory requirements that we've got. we can always hold another meeting, or we could always do what Hobart does and have a separate planning group, which I don't agree with on the basis I think we are the group that should be making decisions on planning. We've just been talking about that with the DAP, and I think that should be all 12 councillors should be involved in that process rather than a committee that sits to one side, which I think they do in Hobart. So I'm mindful of trying to be efficient and effective, and it doesn't mean that we as councillors will do less work. I think the CEO has said there'll be professional development workshops and a lot more sort of detail going into things, which I think means that we'll have the basis for better information, for better decisions that we make when we get to this table. So I think there are a lot of positives associated with it. I'm a little bit of the halfway house with it, and I'm thinking that 3 weeks is probably not a bad way. And again, I'd say, as Councillor Pentridge said, let's do it as a trial. I think you probably got to do it for 6 months just to see how it works, to make sure that you do it for 1 month and you don't know really. So I'd say 6 months is a minimum for a trial, and then we can relook at it at any time really. We're faced with a situation we need to put out a series of events so people know what's going on next year. That's why we're dealing with this today. We could deal with it at the next meeting, but I think given it's here, and I think we probably should talk about it, make a decision. The community then understands why we're making the decision that we're making. So I would probably prefer to go to the 3-week one, so we'll just see how we get on through the rest of the discussion and see how many we can get over the line on whichever one. But I'm not that concerned.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I've got Councillor Walker, then Councillor Dawkins.
Look, I'm only going to speak very briefly here because I think this motion is doomed to fail. Requiring an absolute majority, it would sound that way, but I will just say briefly that the amount of work that staff do or don't have to do has not been documented. It has not been delivered to councillors in any palatable form at all. So there might be a huge amount of work for each meeting. That may be true, but being asked to make a decision on undocumented claims at the moment, something that we've been doing for years and years, we're now being asked to change. Now, fair enough. If I was working for someone and I didn't have to put a report in every 2 weeks and I could put a report in every 4 weeks, I'd probably say I'd put in a report every 4 weeks. But I feel like that at the moment it's policy on the run, it's rushed and it's underbaked, and I won't be supporting 4 weeks. I'll wait to see what happens, but I don't think we should be going much further than that.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. Councillor Dawkins.
Yeah, Councillor Walker is right in some sense that I guess the preamble to this is the sense that there are a lot of changes going on at council at the moment, and we should be supporting those changes by kind of taking the foot off the pedal to some extent, so that things can kind of fall into place, and a lot of the work that is sort of lingering needs to catch up so that we can be a more effective council entirely. It's hard to take self-interest out of it in some sense, because I know I lose a bit of momentum. I need to be here once a week to kind of immerse myself in this space to be able to keep really engaged with the processes. But I understand that in this instance, people are asking us to change, and that's something that I can definitely do. I can definitely change my attitude. I can change the way I engage with this job. And if that means monthly or every 3 weeks, I can do either of those, but I just want to show my willingness to be able to change if that's what's being requested of us today.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Councillor Kai.
When I was first told of this, I thought we still need to be here every week, so that's not going to change. But I love the fact that our new CEO wants to do more professional training, which is something I felt like we should have done right from the start, which we weren't. So while we have the meetings every fortnightly, we've had to do our professional training either online or travel to Devonport, Hobart, to other cities in the state. And I'm assuming that when we do make this change, that this professional training will be done here locally with all the councillors. So I love that idea. Once a month, I feel, is quite long, and it's a big change, a big step. So I would be supporting once every 3 weekly, so we can start with that and see how we go. And if we feel that, yes, we are doing better in meetings, the meeting's not going as long because we're more efficient, we could go out to once a month, but not in one big step. So maybe trial this first, and if it doesn't work, we can always pull back to what we're doing right now. So I'm happy to give it a change, but to a once 3 weekly, not once a monthly. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kai. Councillor Professor Raze.
Thank you very much. To tell you the truth, I enjoyed my last 2 years here, coming like every fortnight, because I think it's nice to feel you are connected with the community. And we do feel it even by their presence is quite important, isn't it? And I believe in personal contact as well, because I think sometimes we can achieve a lot just by talking to each other. But also, I'm not against change. Things moved on. We have to take the council also recommendation into account. And so I am open to the idea about a trial of it, whether it's 4 weeks or 3 weeks. I have no further problem with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Any further comments around the table? And just some clarification, Acting CEO, around the simple and absolute majorities that are required for the recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the governance team for alerting us to this change. So a simple majority is required to set the schedule. The absolute majority is required to begin a council meeting before 5 p.m. So as you know, we currently start meetings at 1 p.m. That would require an absolute majority. But if you wanted to move to a monthly meeting or a 3-weekly meeting, that is a simple majority decision.
Cool. Okay, so putting the current recommendation, noting that there is a foreshadowed 3-weekly, so the 4-weekly, the once a month meeting is what we're voting on right now. All those in favour? Those against? Okay, so the motion has failed, which now brings forward the foreshadowed motion. Councillor Harris has put forward 3 weeks, so 1 meeting every 3 weeks. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. You would be a seconder. Yes.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Yes. So the monthly meeting would have allowed 11 meetings in the year, because we obviously don't have one in between the Christmas end of January period. So I thought there was 12, but in counting I only found 11. So we're now looking at one every...
Just clarification on that, Councillor Harris, is that there is a requirement of 12 meetings.
Must be the AGM, must be the 12th then. Is there one that makes it? I must have miscounted. Perhaps there's one over the page. Regardless, on the 3-week schedule, we have 16 meetings. So that is an increase over that, but not as many as the proposed 24 if we meet every fortnight. So it does allow 8 extra days for professional development, additional workshop time in the year. And I think that's a great advantage. Also, it would take some pressure off the staff who feel they are running on a fortnightly basis. They will have a chance to do what is currently done in a fortnight over a 3-week period. And like Councillor Walker said, having been in a monthly and a weekly and a quarterly reporting cycle at various times in my career, there is no doubt that the longer the reporting cycle, the less stress it is on the people who have to prepare the reports. So I think this is a compromise that we should trial, and we have suggested that perhaps a 6-month period is the right time frame for us to evaluate it, to see whether we continue into the second half of 2025. The other problem, which I didn't get a chance to address, was that under the monthly cycle, there was a period where there were no workshops nor meetings that were for 2 Thursdays in a row, and that occurs 3 times in the year, because there are in fact 52 weeks in the year and not just 48, that a mathematical person like myself would love to have for a year, because then it's nice and even. But nevertheless, I think that 3 weekly meeting cycle, so that is a council meeting that starts on the 23rd, 2 workshops, and then another council meeting on the 13th of February as an example at the start of it.
So Councillor Harris, sorry to interrupt again, but if you want to make it a 6-month trial, which is different to the year trial that is foreshadowed, it would have to have an amendment to it.
No, I think I'd be comfortable leaving it as it is, but I think we as a council will perhaps ask for a revision without it being part of the motion.
Thank you.
That way
Thank you for
they
that
can look at it.
clarification.
It's certainly something, when you change something, you can't expect to get it right every time, and you should always be open, as others said, to making the change. So what it does specify is that the workshops will start at 9:30, the council meetings will still start at 1 for for those who attend or want to attend. And other councils around the state do this. I think it's Clarence Council in Hobart have a 3-weekly meeting cycle. And so I think it's perhaps time for us to trial it for the next year and see how we go from there.
Thanks.
Look forward to my fellow councillors' comments, but there's probably not a lot of sense to repeat a lot of what has been said already.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Deputy Mayor is the seconder.
Yeah, I'll only make one comment just in response to Councillor Walker earlier in a comment that he made about we haven't got evidence that the staff are working harder because of it. I'll just make an anecdotal comment. I sit on a number of other boards, and probably in the last 12 months, and some of those are monthly board meetings, have actually changed that up for the very reason that's been put forward to us today, just to lesser board meetings as a result of trying to ensure the staff aren't spending all their time just going straight into the next board meeting paper. So whilst it might not be evidenced here, I can tell you the evidence is pretty fulsome in other places that I work, which would suggest that what was put forward is actually reasonable for us to accept.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Kai?
Yes, so if we're going to have less meetings in a year, it means that our meetings will definitely be longer. I was just wondering, how would we make a change to pull the meetings forward to start earlier if we find that these meetings are going to go longer? And occasionally last year we have had a couple of times where we've gone over to 6 o'clock, 6:15. So if we were having less meetings, we got these big meetings to attend. How do we make changes so that we don't go to 9 o'clock at night?
Okay, Acting CEO.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Kai. So as you can see, what's proposed at the moment is the first meeting would start at 1 p.m. If after a meeting or two we do find we are running late, it will be a decision of council to start the meetings earlier. So we would bring that to you for a decision. As I said, after 2 or 3 meetings, if we are running late, we just put that at the table. We might start at, say, 11 a.m. to finish up at a reasonable time for everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kai. Councillor Walker.
Just ask a couple of questions, if I may. Thank you, Chair. Currently, councillors are allowed to miss 2 meetings without approved leave. Would that still be the case? And 2 concurrent meetings, that is, meaning I suppose a councillor theoretically could be away for nearly 6 weeks without leave. Would that, being contained in the Local Government Act, mean that that would now be 9 weeks that a councillor, or nearly 9 weeks that a councillor could miss without seeking leave?
Acting CEO for clarification.
Yes, there's no change. That is all contained within the Local Government Act.
And indeed, if a councillor does seek leave, they have to apply at the previous meeting to the meeting in which they would be missing. So therefore, at the moment, if I wanted to miss the next council meeting, I would have had to apply for leave if I wanted approved leave in this meeting 2 weeks before. So that does mean now, if I wanted to miss the next meeting in a 3-week cycle, I would be needing to approve, lodge it 4 weeks before the leave. Would that be correct?
That is correct.
To speak, thank you, Chair. I think this is a travesty of local representation. I think that it's a well-established pattern that we have within the organisation, more importantly within the community. This is unfortunately, it's policy on the run. There's so many unanswered questions around this. Of course, anyone can understand the reasons why you may wish to change it. That goes, as said, but that doesn't prove that it's the best solution. Indeed, the very evidence that we've just changed from a 4-week recommendation to a 3-week recommendation goes to show that we're unsure ourselves as to what the best solution would be. So then you may say, well, let's just try something different. But unfortunately, it's not documented the amount of work that's required for a meeting. Indeed, having meetings less often means more work needs to be done for that meeting. Sometimes our agendas are 500-600 pages of information. Quite difficult to go through. In a 3-week cycle, you can only presume there are at least 50% more, as we've increased the time period by 50%. Now, that doesn't happen every week, I understand, but it does mean that when we come here at 1 o'clock, we may be still here at 7:30 at night trying to finish a meeting in an extreme case. Is that efficient? I'm not sure. Maybe it is. Maybe you can argue that. But like I say, I think it's rushed. I think it's policy on the run. And I think that local democracy is the sufferer in this. It means people from the community who wish to come to a meeting have 50% less question time. It means they have 50%, well, if it was the original cycle, I suppose now you'd say 60, 33%.
33.3 recurring.
Do my maths correctly, 33% less question time. 33% less opportunity to see their local councillors at work. Now, if we go to the report, it states that the reasons here provide an opportunity to the organisation and councillors to reduce the time spent in meetings. That's given as a main reason. It might reduce the frequency, but not necessarily the time. And this change is aimed at improving efficiency while maintaining the quality of governance and service. How can you maintain the quality of governance when you're reducing the amount of time that the public can interact with this particular body? Now, of course, this is not a board. It's nice to compare it to a board sometimes, but I'm not a member of a board of a company. I'm an elected official of Launceston, and I'm very proud to be as well. I'm very proud to represent my community, and I'm very proud to be accessible and transparent at all times. So these are the things that our new local government minister, just yesterday, Kerry Vincent, said in regards to local government, that the review was about driving a high-performing, transparent and accountable sector. How do we be accountable? By being less available. It's about improving local democracy and representation. How do we improve democracy and representation? By having less meetings. It doesn't seem to add up in my mind. I can understand the desire for the administrative workforce to change that cycle because it is necessarily a focus of everything that they do around these meetings. But it's not every worker in this building at all times must be at this meeting. It is certain people whose job it is to represent the sectors that they represent, to be here, to be accountable, just as we are. So, naturally, I'm supporting the status quo. And I think this is the opportunity to say that because it seems as though some compromise is being sort of hatched here between the initial recommendation and the status quo, and that somehow it mitigates the concerns that we may all have. I don't think I'm unique or alone in having those concerns, but somehow if we make a compromise, that will somehow placate all sides. And unfortunately, I think that in this case it just doesn't. I'd love to see the evidence that would show those efficiencies that are gained. I would love to see the evidence that would show that this would create a more strategically focused council body, but there is none. There's absolutely none. And at this stage, I will not be supporting any change. And for once in this room, I'm the one arguing to maintain the status quo.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. Councillor Professor Raze.
Just a question. I would like to confirm that from all the council in Tasmania, we have like 11 of them. 10 of them have a monthly meeting. Only one had every 3 weeks. Is there any other place where they have it fortnightly in Tasmania?
Do we know? Do we know those?
No. So that was a snapshot from 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon from probably the 11 larger councils from the research. So to pull up the next...
Well, there's 29 altogether.
There's 29 altogether. So we can do that, but it'll take a little bit of time.
What I will say to that point as well, comparable councils, which was what was sent around last night, I think is probably the most relevant thing to be concerned with. And a number of mainland councils, particularly ones that the CEO has referenced as being really shining lights of being in that strategic mindset, do meet monthly as well.
Thank you. Further comments around the table? Councillor Pentridge?
I don't want to go into all the cliches, but I'd suggest that some of my friends read where Doubting Thomas come from. It's a good read, actually. And what there's 2 points I'd love to make. One, I'm quoting another person that said once that the future belongs to the brave. None of us really like change. And I think what we're missing here, we've got a new team of administrators here. It was their idea to try and become more efficient and move on. I think I'm not giving it an opportunity. Then the people that we elected to be part of this new team, I don't think we are doing the right thing by, personally. I can understand wanting to be connected. Any of my councillors that feel that they're sort of missing out a bit, if they would share my phone for a period of time, because I have, my phone never stops ringing, and I wish to God I'd find someone else's phone number. And I'm going to recommend and send them all the copies of my colleagues. So surely to God they couldn't be ringing everybody as many times as they ring me. No? So, and I didn't think I was that popular. But anyway, I think I'm making a point. Yeah, there's a lot of that we have been indoctrinated into a certain system, but I think we should all remember that this was put forward to us by our new administration. I'm on record, have never been that fond of the last one. I hope to God that there doesn't have to be a third one. And I support what they're doing, but they've recommended some changes, and that was what all this was about. So thank you for the time to express how I feel.
Thanks, Councillor Pentridge. Any further comments around the table? Anything further to close, Councillor Harris?
Yes, thank you, and thanks for fellow councillors' thoughts. I will just make the note that I worked at Telstra, which had a 9-day fortnight introduced not long after. I started it was Telecom back in those days, and they had 40-hour work weeks. I'm sure many would remember a 40-hour work week changed to a 9-day fortnight. So their hours work dropped from 40 hours to 36 3/4 on average each day, but they only worked for 9 days, so they actually worked for 8 hours 10. Productivity increased dramatically because they didn't have they had 9 startups in the start of the fortnight rather than 10. And in the same way, we will have less introductions by the Mayor for us to start the meeting, less opportunities for us to stand and talk on ceremonial things about what we've done and all that sort of stuff. So the reality is our meetings in total time over the year will probably be less because we'll have more time to devote for actual debate of these items, in addition to potentially having more time to be listening and visiting our constituents or in fact doing personal development. So that is why I urge your support for the 3-weekly cycle of council meetings. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. So putting it to the vote then, all those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried.
I'll be here every 2 weeks anyway.
Everyone will be here every Thursday.
Okay. So, councillors, moving through the agenda, we don't have any items that have been identified as a part of the CEO network, but we do have a late item that has come in at 22. So late items at 22. 22.1 is the acceptance of an urgent late item committee report. So this is for the CEO performance review. So the recommendation is by absolute majority that the council determines to deal with this item at 22.2, and also by absolute majority we determine to deal with this, the CEO officer's contract and performance review, and also we determine to consider it in closed council. So somebody to please move the motion. Okay, thanks, Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Harris. All those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. So we now take on the late item, which moves us to the position to ask the question to go into closed council. So we're going into closed council to discuss the following matters: confirmation of minutes, CEO contract and performance review committee, and end of closed session. Yeah. Yes, which we've just done.
Which one is part is in closed and one part is in open.
Okay.
2.2 is in open.
Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about in close. So I need somebody to accept this as well. So 22.2 is the committee report itself.
Talk about that in open.
Yeah, we haven't gone closed yet.
Yep.
So it's the CEO contract and performance with the recommendation that the council notes the activity and the CEO contract and performance review committee and notes the specific outcomes will be considered in closed session, which I thought we sort of just did, but that's okay. It's good to have that formal process. Somebody please to move. Deputy Mayor to move. Councillor Dawkins has seconded. All those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Just a little bit more formal. Okay, so now I need somebody to help me move into closed council. Okay, Councillor Harris to move. Councillor Pentridge has seconded. All those in favour? That's all councillors present. We moved into closed council. Okay. So back in open session now. May I please have somebody to move the table of contents as true reflection of what was spoken of? Okay. Okay, that's been moved by Councillor Harris, seconded by Councillor Pentridge. All those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. Okay, as we close the meeting today, we'll see you at this stage back in a fortnight.